I told you, we don't serve beggars here. The plate hit the floor with a crash, scattering steaming food across the tiles. Clara didn't flinch. She stepped in front of the trembling old man, shielding him with her body, as if her apron could block the shame. Rain pounded the windows. The few remaining customers looked away, pretending they hadn't heard. She reached into her pocket. Then take it out of my tips. But that wasn't enough. You're fired. Get out. The next morning, just as the sun broke through the clouds, 200 soldiers in full uniform stood silently outside that same diner. They didn't come for coffee. They came for her. Clara James wasn't the kind of woman people noticed. She didn't try to be. At 32, she'd grown used to living in the spaces between conversations, filling coffee cups, wiping counters, offering quiet smiles that went unreturned. In a town like Ridgefield, Kentucky, where the factory had shut down and the paint on, every storefront seemed to be peeling in slow motion. Being invisible wasn't a choice. It was survival. She wore her brown apron like armor. Her ponytail was always tied just tight enough to keep the weight of the day off her shoulders. Most mornings, Clara opened Billy's diner before the sun did. Most nights, she closed it long after the last regular had shuffled out. No one asked why she worked double shifts. No one asked her much at all, but Clara had her reasons. And all of them traced back to a small apartment with a cracked kitchen window, a one-eyed tabby named Smokey, and a shoebox filled with war medals under her bed. She'd been raised by her grandfather, Henry James, a Korean War veteran with a crooked back, a sharper tongue, and a heart soft as cornbread. He'd stepped in when her parents vanished into their own storm of mistakes. He raised Clara on stories of discipline, dignity, and doing what's right, even when no one claps for you. Especially then, Clara, he'd say, puffing on his old pipe. Honor isn't loud, it's quiet, like sweeping the porch before guests come, even if they never show. When he passed 3 years ago, the world lost one of its better listeners. Clara didn't cry much at the funeral, not because she didn't hurt, but because she knew he would have wanted her to hold strong. Stand tall, he used to whisper, even when you feel small. Since then, she'd buried that strength deep. She worked early and late shifts, took care of Smokey, and paid rent on time. Or at least she had, until last month when her roommate lost her job, skipped town without warning, and left Clara with an overdue utility bill, half a lease, and a landlord with no patience. By the time she dragged her suitcase and a box of essentials into a rented room above an auto garage, Smokey meowed once, rubbed his scarred face against her calf, and curled up in a drawer lined with a kitchen towel. That night, Clara stared at the ceiling with one hand resting on the cat's side and promised herself she'd make it through again. The new place was barely a step above a storage unit. One outlet sparked if she looked at it wrong. The bathroom. Faucet screamed like a banshee. Her savings, $64.38, and falling. But still, she got up at 5 a.m. and walked to the diner in the rain. She still smiled at customers who left coins as tips. She still brought Smokey a spoonful of tuna from the break room stash when she could sneak it. People in town said Clara James was a quiet girl. But what they really meant was, she didn't ask for anything, didn't complain when someone spilled coffee on her shoes, didn't flinch when the cook barked orders through a cloud of grease, didn't argue when her paycheck came up light and the manager told her to be grateful she had work at all. What they didn't see was that Clara noticed everything. She noticed which regulars looked lonelier after their meal. She noticed when the new dishwasher had bruises he couldn't explain. She especially noticed the ones who came in out of the rain, asking only for water, never quite meeting her eyes. Her life was a patchwork of small kindnesses and invisible burdens, and she wore them all without complaint. Sometimes late at night, she held her grandfather's dog tags in one hand and Smokey in the other and whispered, "We're okay. We're still okay." But the truth was, she was tired. Not just bone tired, soul tired. Tired from pretending, from swallowing injustice, from watching the world while standing on the sidelines. She never asked for a miracle. She just hoped, The roof wouldn't leak again, and then, on a rainy Tuesday evening, quiet as any other, the door to the diner creaked open. A man stepped in, soaked, trembling. He wore a tattered military coat. The U.S. Army insignia barely clung to the sleeve. His beard was gray, patchy, unkempt. His leg dragged slightly behind him, bandaged in layers of gauze. His hands, shaking as he removed a spin-knit cap, were covered in calluses, knuckles scarred and swollen. He held a small paper bag close to his chest like it was glass. Clara, wiping a ketchup stain behind the counter, didn't flinch. She saw how he paused, uncertain, scanning the room not for a seat, but for permission to exist. Most diners turned away, suddenly fascinated with their coffee or phones. Clara walked over, towel still in hand. "Evening," she said softly. "Can I get you something warm?" He didn't look at her. His eyes stayed on the floor like just speaking might get him thrown out. Finally, he lifted his gaze, pain and pride fighting for space in that tired expression. "Just a cup of hot." "Water, ma'am. And maybe, if you've got a crust of bread headed for the trash." Clara's breath caught. She'd heard those exact words before. From her grandfather, recounting a rainy night in Busan, 1952, when a stranger fed him. She nodded once. "I'll see what I can do." In the kitchen, a returned order sat under the heat lamp, chicken and dumplings, untouched. She plated it carefully with buttered bread and poured a fresh cup of coffee. Then she walked it out like it was the most normal thing in the world. "This was sent back just now," she said, setting it in front of him. "Still hot." He stared at the plate, startled. "I can't pay." "It's already paid for," Clara said, smiling. "And the coffee's on me." He wrapped his fingers slowly around the mug. "You remind me of my wife," he murmured. "She used to do things like this. Said everyone deserves warmth, especially those who've lived through too much cold." Across the room, the diner's owner spotted them. His eyes narrowed, his mouth already forming words louder than any storm outside. But Clara wasn't thinking about rules or repercussions. She was thinking about the man in front of her, someone who had clearly fought for a country that now passed him by. As he ate, he held the fork like it weighed 1,000 pounds, chewed each bite like it was the first solid food in days, sat, straight despite the pain in his leg, didn't complain, didn't beg, didn't blame. When he finished, he looked up, eyes watery. "You just saved a soul tonight, miss," he whispered. Might have been broken, but not forgotten. He reached into his coat and pulled out a rusted dog tag, the chain frayed and dull. "Name's Eli Turner. If I don't make it through this winter, I want someone to know I existed." And just like that, he left. His silhouette swallowed by rain. Clara stood frozen, the tag warm in her hand despite the cold. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Rent was still due. Smokey still needed food. The world still spun in its usual indifference. But something inside her had shifted. For the first time in a long time, she'd done something that mattered, even if no one else noticed. The front door slammed open. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Wayne Becker, the diner's owner, stood red-faced in the doorway. His eyes locked on the empty plate at Eli's now vacant seat. The steam still lingered in the air like it was trying to defend her. Clara stood tall, the dog tag safely tucked in her apron. "He was a veteran, sir," she said quietly. "Asked for hot water and a crust of bread. I gave him food we were going to throw out." Wayne's voice boomed loud enough to turn heads. "This ain't a charity, Clara. I've told you before. If people see us feeding street trash for free, they'll think we're a soup kitchen." The corner went silent. Clara stirred her coffee with exaggerated slowness. No one met her eyes. No one spoke. She inhaled deeply. "I paid for the coffee," she said. "You can take it out of my tips." Wayne slammed his palm against the counter. The sound cracked through the diner like a gunshot. "I said no," he barked. "You just made me look soft in front of customers. You don't get to decide how I run this place." Then came the final blow. "You're fired. Right now. Pack your things and get out." He jabbed his finger at the door like a dagger. The diner grew colder, not from the rain outside, but from what was missing inside. Decency, support, anyone willing to say a word in her defense. Clara's hands trembled as she untied her apron. She wasn't surprised, not really. Disappointed, yes. Hurt, absolutely. But surprised? No. What stung? Worse than the shouting was the silence from everyone else. A woman in the corner leaned toward her husband and whispered, "That's what happens when you bring trouble inside." Someone else cleared their throat, shifted in their seat, and went back to reading the menu as if none of it mattered. No, one stood up. No one said she was right. No one even thanked her. She walked out into the rain. Her canvas shoes were soaked in seconds, her hair plastered to her forehead. She clutched her bag, but her spine stayed straight, just like her grandfather taught her. Outside, under the awning, her heart pounded. She didn't cry. She couldn't afford to, not now. A rustling sound caught her ear. From the alley beside the diner, the veteran reappeared, hobbling toward her with effort. His breath came shallow, but his eyes still held that quiet fire. "I saw what happened," he said. "I shouldn't have let you pay a price for me." Clara shook her head. "You didn't do anything wrong." He reached into his coat and pressed something into her hand. His dog tag. "You just saved a shattered soul, child," he said hoarsely. "You reminded me I wasn't invisible." Before she could answer, he turned and vanished into the rain. That night, Clara sat in her tiny room. Smokey curled against her hip. Her wet clothes hung awkwardly over a chair. The only light came from a street lamp bleeding through the blinds. On her cracked phone screen, she refreshed her bank account. $42, 12 hours, rent due in 10 days, no job, no health insurance, no backup plan. But she had something else. Courage. And somehow, in a world that had just rejected her, that felt like a kind of wealth. She picked up the dog tag, reading the name etched into the worn metal. Turner, Eli J. serial number F472. The rest was faded, nearly unreadable. She traced the letters with her thumb, wondering where he had served, what he had lost, and how this town, this country, could so easily forget him. The next morning, her world shifted again. She didn't know a teenager had been filming until it hit the internet. A shaky, grainy video shot through the diner's window showed her standing tall, calm, while the owner's finger jabbed toward the door, his voice loud and cruel. By noon, it had gone viral, but not in the way she'd hoped. The comments were brutal. Rules are rules. She should have asked permission. Bet this isn't the first time she gave away food. Maybe she's been stealing. Her former co-workers unfriended her. One messaged her privately. Always trying to be the hero. How's that working out now? She applied to 3 other diners. None called her back. At one, the manager paused and said gently, "We can't risk the attention, honey. Nothing personal." Another didn't let her finish the application. They just slid it back to her and nodded toward the door. By sundown, she wandered downtown, cold, damp, exhausted. The dog tag sat heavy in her coat pocket. At a bus shelter, she saw him. Eli, Turner, curled beneath a plastic sheet, one arm over his chest, the other wrapped around that same paper bag. Clara knelt beside him, set down a small package wrapped in newspaper, half a sandwich, all she had, and whispered, "Thank you for remembering me." She turned and walked away, unaware that a black military vehicle had pulled up at the corner. Inside, a man in uniform watched her go and made a phone call. The rain stopped just before dawn. It left behind a town scrubbed in silence. The streets shimmered with thin puddles, reflecting the first golden light. Ridgefield's downtown slept. Storefronts were dark, traffic lights blinked yellow, and the air smelled of wet pavement. And something else. Anticipation. At 6:45 a.m., the rumble began, not of engines, not of footsteps, but of presence. One by one, black SUVs pulled into Main Street and parked in front of Billy's diner. The first to step out was a man in a sharply pressed U.S. Army uniform. His chest was lined with medals, his shoulders squared like a man who still carried a battlefield on his back. He paused at the diner's door and waited. Behind him came a procession, soldiers in full-dress uniform, some Army, others Navy, Marines, Air Force. They formed a perfect line along the diner's entrance, silent and unmoving. The town froze. Cars slowed. Shopkeepers peered through windows. Inside, Wayne Becker had just finished restocking napkins when the bell over the door jingled. He looked up and nearly dropped the glass in his hand. The officer stepped in, eyes hard. "I'd like to speak to the owner." Wayne stepped forward, pale. I'm the owner." More people filtered in behind him, drawn by the crowd outside and whispers on the street. The officer removed his cap. "My name is Colonel Matthew Turner, son of Eli Turner." The diner fell still. Wayne opened his mouth, but nothing came out. "The man you humiliated here yesterday," Colonel Turner said, "is the reason I'm alive." The air thickened. Even the kitchen was silent. In 2007, during my third deployment to Iraq, our convoy was ambushed. My transport was hit. 12 of us were trapped. Your beggar carried me 3 miles under enemy fire with shrapnel in his own leg. He refused treatment until we were safe. He pulled out a laminated citation. "The Silver Star. This is his." Wayne looked around, desperate for someone to defend him. No one moved. "He refused help for years," Turner continued, voice cracking slightly. "After my mother died, his PTSD worsened. He disappeared. We searched for months, and now we find him here, fed and sheltered not by the system, not by the town, but by a waitress, one you fired." There were murmurs outside. Phones captured every word. Hashtags were already forming. "Michael Rutherford earned medals most men only dream of," Turner said, steadier now. "But he told me once, medals don't feed the hungry. He pawned this." He gestured to the medal, "to buy food for a homeless family." He paused. The waitress who stood up for him yesterday reminded me of the country he thought he'd lost. A young corporal entered, carrying a black case. Inside it, the Silver Star, the one Eli had pawned. "Bring her here, Colonel," Turner said. Clara had no idea what was happening until someone knocked on her door. A local reporter stood there, camera crew behind her. "They're asking for you," she said. "The soldiers. The whole block is shut down. Colonel Turner, you have to come now." Clara thought she was dreaming. But the crowd, the eyes, the uniforms, the salutes, they were real. As she approached, the line of soldiers parted. Then, as one, they raised their right hands to their foreheads. 200 soldiers, saluting her. Clara froze. Her throat tightened. Her breath caught. No one spoke. No one needed to. "Colonel," Turner stepped forward and presented the medal. "My father wanted you to have this." Clara shook her head, trembling. "I can't. It's not mine." Turner gently placed it in her hand. "It is now." The fallout came swiftly. The diner closed the next day. Supplies canceled. Staff quit. Veterans groups picketed the front steps. Wayne Becker vanished from town within weeks. Clara didn't gloat. She didn't post on social media. She simply returned to what she did best, serving with quiet strength. This time, she had help. A veteran nonprofit hired her to manage a new community kitchen. Many of the soldiers she met that day came back to volunteer. The line outside the kitchen grew, but so did the warmth inside. In the corner of her office sat a small wooden box. Inside, a folded flag, a silver star, and one tarnished dog tag that never left her pocket. It didn't happen overnight. Justice never does. It creeps in slowly, like morning light across a windowsill. Quiet, steady, unstoppable. The open 24 hours neon sign had gone dark. Behind the dusty window, a sun-bleached "For Lease" notice flapped in the breeze. For years, the old diner had served truckers, locals, and tourists alike. But after that morning, the morning of the soldiers, it never served anyone again. Across town, something new had quietly taken root. In a warehouse that once held broken vending machines, lights now glowed late into the night. Laughter bounced down the hallways. The smell of chili, cornbread, and warm coffee floated out the doors. Clara stood at the center of it all. The Ridgefield Community Kitchen, run by a veteran-founded nonprofit, had offered her the role of manager within a week of the incident. She hadn't asked for it. She never sought attention. But people like Colonel Turner made sure her story was told, not for applause, but to remind the country what real courage looks like. On paper, Clara was now in charge of the kitchen. In truth, it felt more like a family than a job. Former soldiers peeled potatoes beside single mothers. High school volunteers ladled soup next to retired nurses. Smokey the cat, now a beloved fixture, lounged on a windowsill like a war-weary general. One good eye, soft heart. But the most unforgettable moment came just 1 week after the salute that changed everything. It was just after 4 p.m., and the kitchen was winding down when the front door creaked open. A small boy stepped inside, no more than 7 or 8, with sandy hair, oversized sneakers, and a serious expression. In one hand, he held a dollar bill, carefully folded. In the other, a cookie wrapped in wax paper and tied with string. Walked straight to the counter and looked up at Clara. "I saw you in the video," he said. "My grandpa was a soldier too. He used to help people, so I wanted to help someone too." He placed the dollar and cookie gently on the counter. Clara knelt beside him, hands on her knees, fighting tears. "Can I use this to help someone else?" he asked. She didn't speak for a long moment. She couldn't. Instead, she placed a hand over her heart, the same way 200 soldiers had done days earlier, and gave him a quiet nod. No speech, no grand gesture, just one small act echoing forward. Eli Turner, the veteran who started it all, now had a roof over his head and regular care through a nearby VA housing program. Word spread that his son visited often. Sometimes younger soldiers came just to sit with him and listen. He told stories, not just about battles fought overseas, but quieter ones fought right here at home. Clara visited when she could. They didn't say much. They didn't have to. She still carried his dog tag and kept the silver star in a plain box beside her bed. Some nights, she'd trace its edges with her fingers and whisper the words her grandfather once told her. Honor isn't something loud, it's quiet. In time, people moved on. The story faded from headlines. The video scrolled out of view beneath yesterday's noise. But those who had seen it, really seen it, remembered. Not because Clara stood up, but because she did it when it was hardest. Because she gave without expecting anything back. Because in a world that often forgets its quiet heroes, she reminded us all what dignity looks like when no one is clapping. Into awe, a world rushing past itself, it's easy to miss the quiet moments where true character reveals itself. Clara James didn't march. She didn't protest. She didn't post. All she did was offer a warm plate of food and a little dignity to a man the world had discarded. And somehow, that was enough to shake an entire town. This isn't just a story about a waitress or a veteran. It's about all of us, about how we treat people when we think no one's watching, about the value of kindness when there are no cameras, and the cost of doing what's right when there's no applause waiting at the end. How many people have we overlooked? At the grocery store, on the park bench, at our own dinner tables. How often have fear, policy, or pride spoken louder than compassion? In today's America, where loneliness rises and respect feels like a relic. Clara's story reminds us that honor doesn't always wear a medal. Sometimes it's a whisper, a cookie, a cup of coffee. We'd love to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed a moment like Clara's? Have you ever stood up for someone when it wasn't easy? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might inspire someone else to act. Thank you for spending this time with us. If Clara's story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who still believes in quiet courage. Here on our channel, we tell true-hearted stories. For those who haven't forgotten what dignity means, because some heroes don't wear uniforms.